If you have questions, concerns, and are just lost when it comes to planning for retirement, meet Steve Hoyle and Derek Caldwell of the Hoyle Financial Group. And if you're new to the show, when we say mailbox money, we mean that guaranteed income that you're going to get every single month. And that brings me to the topic of annuities. And when you bring this subject up, you're going to get a lot of different opinions. On the Barron's Roundtable, they address the negative and even the positive roles that annuities have in a retirement portfolio.
So, Elizabeth, you and I have talked a lot about annuities. Mm-hmm. I'm not a huge fan, but I will concede that sometimes you don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. There's a behavioral reason why annuities can serve an important role.
Absolutely. The sleep at night factor, if you know that your expenses are covered by guaranteed income sources, including Social Security and an annuity, these market gyrations aren't going to keep you up at night. And, you can use them to cover your day-to-day bills in retirement, and they can also allow you to take more equity risk. If you know your near-term expenses, your essential expenses are fixed, then you can, take more equity risk, and that can help the longevity of your portfolio.
All right, so let's break this down for our listeners here, Steve, because I know annuities provide income, and we know the ingredient to a successful retirement is income, and income. So do you also use these as a buffer to take more risk?
Absolutely. We do guaranteed income, as you're saying, for life for, not only one of the spouses, but we can make sure that neither one of them run out of that income. But we also do a lot of annuities for, safety, let your money grow. Just to give you an example, I'll throw one out there. Maybe one has a 10% cap in the Standard & Poor's 500. What that means is you can make up to 10% each year in the S&P. So if the S&P goes up 12%, you're going to get just 10. But that's a lot, Jess. But if the S&P is negative, like it was a couple of years ago, 34%, zero becomes your hero, and you're not going to lose any money in the market. So I do think that's a great point. When you have a strategy for income, to know you have plenty of income, putting some of your money asset allocated to make sure you don't lose that principal, you can have some of that other money aggressive over there and let it grow and take more risk. But Jess, what I tell people is you don't want to run out of money and have to live with your kids. It's a big deal. And I laugh about that, but I've seen it happen. I've seen people come to see us that have nowhere to go. They didn't have a written plan. Jess, it's really, really interesting. When we think about planning, people call us all the time and said, if we knew what we wanted to do in retirement, we'd go retire. It's crazy, the psychology of retirement. I tell people so often, it's 25% about the numbers, I believe, and 75% about the emotions. If you look at real life, Jess, and you look at couples that come and go out of our door, opposites attract. So you have one that's very conservative, worries all the time about money. Then you have another one that's a huge risk taker, and they're usually in charge of the money. And the other spouse is always worried. Do we have enough monthly money? Do we have enough money to retire? Oh, honey, of course we do. Don't worry about that. So what I tell people is they come see us. Opposites attract. They're sitting on opposite ends of the conference room. We've got to come together and help each other feel comfortable with a strategy, Jess. But the first step is figuring out what you want to do in retirement. Do you want to keep your grandkids? Do you want to travel all 50 states? Do you want to travel Europe? Do you want to build a new house? Do you want to volunteer? Each of those things takes a different bucket of money, all different sizes. So when you figure out what you want to do, then we can work backwards and figure out how much money you need on a monthly basis, every month to make sure you can enjoy that. So figuring out that psychology and not having to worry and just figuring out who's going to handle the remote is a huge, huge deal. And we laugh about it, but I hear about it all the time, Jess.
Steve, I don't know about you, but when I'm doing laundry and I just happen to find $5 or $20 that I left in my pocket, I'm pretty excited about that.
Of course, absolutely.
You're like, oh, man, now I can go to the store and get this and that. I didn't know I had this. Well, if you're excited about finding $20, imagine how you'd feel about thousands of dollars that you would find. Guys, I'm telling you, it's hard to believe that people actually lose track of thousands of dollars in retirement money. But there was a report recently by financial services firm called Capitalize. They say it's happening as more workers change jobs than ever before. So when they switch, they leave behind that 401k, and then they go to the next job and the next job. Well, all this is totaling up to nearly $2 trillion. So those 29 million idle accounts make up for 1/4 of all assets held in a 401k, with the average balance amounting to over $56,000, guys. Not chump change here. So, Steve, is this something that you check for and that you see all the time? And most importantly, how do you find it?
I see it a lot in the oil and gas industry because so many of those companies change names or bought up or switch over. People leave that job and they go, oh, it's just sitting there. I don't need to worry about it. Then they move and they don't get a statement, or the statements come online and it goes to their junk and they lose track of it. I kind of come from a generation, I've been doing this since I was 25. And, my parents kind of stayed with the same job. My dad was a criminal malpractice attorney. My mom was a banker. They didn't move around. But I'm telling you, I had a guy come in a couple weeks ago for one of our educational workshops. He had 16 different retirement accounts, but 2 of them, he couldn't think of the name or whatever. And so we kind of backtracked and I gave him some advice and said that he needed to go to the National Registry of Unclaimed Retirement Benefits. And he said, hold on, say that slowly. And so I said the National Registry of Unclaimed Retirement Benefits. So we pulled it up and said, you need to go there. If you can't find it there, I would really think that you should think about going to the Retirement Savings Lost and Found database from the Department of Labor. And then if you can't find it those 2 places, there's this clearinghouse called Missing Money. So I said, why don't you go back through your old W-2s, or look at your tax returns. Oh, he says, I've never saved a tax return. Once I file it, I shred it. I'm like,
oh no.
And it was just crazy thinking about it. And we were able to help him find all the accounts. I had a guy 3 years ago, had over $800,000. And, he could not remember the name of the company that bought his old company back east. And he didn't really know. And we finally found it. But I wouldn't have not been able to go to sleep if I had $800,000 that I couldn't find. We're not talking about a little bit of money, Jess. We're talking about a lot of money. And his wife's sitting there the whole time going, I've been telling him for months. And I'm like, finally, whoa, we're really not accomplishing anything having this, told you so. And we figured it out and got a hold of them. And so then we finally had them fax a statement to our office so that they could leave. And by the way, Jess, we got a copy just for her so she could put it in her purse. It's really serious. Lots of money out there. There's trillions of dollars floating around. And what happens is people go, they're working like a dog every day, but they're not really getting time on their side. And, I tell people, if you can get started a few years early, we have tools in our toolbox that roll up at 8 and 9% per year, Jess. Guaranteed roll up, guaranteed money, so that at the end of the day how much money you're going to have for income. A lot of people come in 10 years early and say, well, we ought to wait a while. You needed to do this and this. Last month, this guy called and said, are you Steve Hoyle? Yeah, I am. He said, well, listen, you helped my sister, and she told me a couple years ago when I got ready to retire, I needed to call you. I said, sounds great. Well, we need to get together. Well, listen, I gave my notice Monday, and this is on a Thursday, Jess, and tomorrow's my last day, so we ought to think about getting together. I'm like, wow. It was a holiday week. It was Christmas holidays. It was crazy. But I really think people get started early, Jess, and have time on your side. You can figure out so much more. It's all about options in retirement and finding those options. And I think it's so important. So great place to start is to know where your money is. And I mean, when I say that, I don't mean that sarcastically. I really mean it.
Yeah, exactly. Know where your money is, know how it's working for you or against you. And I know one of the biggest questions people have is, well, when do I come in and meet with somebody like Steve? Is it my 40s, my 50s, when I finally turned 60? What would you say is kind of a good ballpark age of getting serious?
Well, just that, some people, it depends on when you're going to work, but I would really, at least 3 years before you're getting ready to retire is really a good time to get together. But, a lot of people come to see us, Jess, they have an old 401k, an old IRA, and we can put that money to work for them. And that just gets them so much further down the road. You have money sitting on the sideline. I had a lady come in last year, and she had inherited about $600,000, Jess. And she said, I got a check, and I put it in my drawer, and then I went to the bank a couple months later, and it was too old, and so I got a cashier's check for it. Great. And she said, then I've kept that cashier's check. She pulled that cashier's check out of her purse. Jess, It was over 3 years old. Can you imagine $500,000 or $700,000 sitting in the drawer doing absolutely nothing? I mean, she could have been earning 3.85 in a savings account. It's just everybody needs to get started. And I think just the thing is when you sit down and you become laser focused on that final phase of life called retirement, what you can accomplish is just unbelievable. I've seen people do the neatest things in retirement and use a small amount of money to make a huge pivotal difference. So if you've got money sitting on the sidelines, call us. It doesn't matter how old you are. Call us. Let's sit down and really figure out how to get that money working for you. A lot of people just have that money in an old 401k. It's never been reallocated. It's doing nothing. I mean, it's everything. I don't care whether you're in Austin, Texas, Amarillo, Texas, Lubbock, Texas, Midland, Texas, Seminole, wherever you are across Texas. We say retire Texas style. What we mean by that, Jess, is retire bigger, better, and something that you want to be proud of in retirement.
The one and only Jamie Foxx, he's actually from Texas here. He considers himself a very lucky man. Back in 2023, the actor suffered a stroke while filming a movie in Atlanta. It left him in a coma. And when Fox woke up, he had to learn to walk again, to talk again, all the things. And he expressed his gratitude recently when accepting BET's Ultimate Icon Award.
I got to be honest. When I saw that memoriam, I was like, man, it could have been me. I don't know why I went through what I went through, but I know my second chance I'm not going to turn down. I have so much love to give. I told him, I said, man, just give me one more crack at this. And I promise, I said, whatever reason you put this on me, I promise I'm gonna do right.
That was an emotional speech he gave. He's been talking about this forever, about how he's so grateful that he came out of the coma. He's looking at life differently through another lens. Anybody that goes through a health scare, I think, does that. And it's really easy for all of us, myself included, to think, I'm immortal. Nothing's ever going to happen to me. And then often enough, you see all the time that retirement, Steve, they're derailed by healthcare surprises. So I want to know, what can people do now to avoid becoming a financial burden to a loved one later on when unfortunate things could happen?
Having that plan. We talk about that a married couple these days in retirement can spend up to $250,000 out of pocket on, experimental drugs, all kinds of things to stay alive. Having a plan, having emergency money, and having a really strong, guaranteed, predictable income strategy, curtailing those taxes, doing all those things, having a really strong estate plan. Listen to his story, Jess. After just going through a major surgery with my mom, it really depends on having a power of attorney. You picking while you're going to be ill, who is going to be your medical and your financial power of attorney. You don't want your kids arguing on it. You want the right one. Having a great estate planning is so important. I just got home from Tulum, Mexico. My daughter's sister-in-law got married. We've been on trips all over the world with her in-laws. They're the neatest people. They're family. You always think that we're bulletproof. Well, Saturday night, we're at the bride and the groom stayed at this compound house with this incredible rooftop. And we're up there. We have this wonderful ceremony. And we're about to take family pictures. And I look over there, and her father-in-law had fallen over flat on his back. He was having convulsions. We didn't know if he was having a heart attack, if he was having a seizure. He turned white. After about 30 minutes, he was able to sit up and go to the hospital, spend the night, and he's better. But I'm going to tell you something. You talk about things changing like that in a minute. It made me think, have I dotted every I, have I crossed every T? Are my documents in order? My will, my trust? All of those things are so important. I've never in my life seen things change that quick. They got into the hospital and we tried to go on with the wedding party, dinner or that night. But it was hard, Jess. It really was. So I'm telling you what, I was just really thankful that he was okay. And I was really thankful because they're family. We all have a small group of people that we absolutely adore. And those are those people. And I'm just so thankful. But I'm telling you, Jess, it's in retirement. That's what I tell people about retirement. This is your one chance to do some phase of your life exactly the way you want to do it. Pick what you want to do, how you want to do it, where you want to go, what you want to do. Jess, it's the most important decision. You work all your life for the man, and then you're going to be in retirement. And from experience, Jess, After doing this 35 plus years, I have a lot of clients that have been retired a lot longer than they ever worked. So while you have your health, it's so important to do what you, and if you have a spouse, you all want to do. So while you're healthy, have a retirement plan, have an income plan, have all that thought out, and go enjoy those years. I've had a lot of clients just that over the years, when I retire, I'm going to redo my house. When I'm going to retire, I'm going to travel. When I retire, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. I'm going to go see my sister in Hawaii, whatever that is. And a lot of people never get to do that. So I'm telling you, this is your chance to put a plan together, figure out what you want to do, and make life everything you wanted. I'm going to tell you, Jess, over the hundreds of people, there's no telling how many people I've worked with. I can't tell you how many of them said, I would have retired 2 years, 3 years, 5 years ago if I had sat down and done this earlier. I could have retired 5 years ago. I just couldn't get my arms wrapped around it. So what I want to tell you today, you may have listened to us for years, but you've never been to our website. Go to our website. Look at our team. No matter where you are in Texas, we can start out with a Zoom if we need to. Whatever we need to do, but go to retiretexasstyle.com. If you decide you want to start talking to us, there's a little floating toggle. Start typing and say, hi, Steve. Hi, Derek. But listen, most of all, let's get started today. Don't procrastinate. It's everything.
If you'd like to sit down with Steve and Derek or a member of the Hoyle Financial Group, visit retiretexasstyle.com.
Investment advice offered through Hoyle Wealth Management, a Texas-registered investment advisor able to provide investment advice in states where it's registered, exempt, or excluded from registration. Content contained herein should not be construed as an offer or solicitation for investment advice or for the purchase or sale of any security, insurance, or other investment product. Investments involve the risk of loss, including possible loss of principal. Please consult with a qualified financial, tax, accounting, or legal professional before implementing any ideas or strategies discussed here. Content provided is obtained from sources believed to be reliable but cannot be guaranteed as to its accuracy or completeness. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance products, including annuities offered through Steve Hoyle, Texas Insurance License 716036. Annuity guarantees rely on the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company. Read your contract for restrictions, limitations, or penalties. Steve Hoyle is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if Steve Hoyle is licensed in your state, please call 806-371-9473.